Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel many a time before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years. It's probably fair to say that these guys are one of the best known Swedish craft breweries across the world, mainly known for their New England hazy IPAs, but I've had lots of different styles from these guys, and the one we're going to have a look at today is another style that I've never had from them before. So fingers crossed it's another interesting beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head up towards Gothenburg once again, Göteborg as you would say in Swedish, the Swedish craft beer capital up there on the west coast, and we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Stigbergets Bryggeri. So this is one of the latest installments from their Ringöbräu series that they do of German lager beers. Although I don't know if it is going to be exclusively lagers right enough, but the Ringöbräu series is their German style of beers anyway. But this one is simply called the Ringöbräu Märzen. It comes in at 5.5% ABV, and as the name suggests, this one is a Märzen style lager beer. So this one was released as part of the local småskalig assortment through Stigbergets here in Sweden for April of 2021. The exact release date this time was the 6th of April, a little bit later than normal, and this beer was released along with the Bionic Triple IPA and also a Maibog, also in the Ringöbräu series as well. So you'll see me review that one in a few videos time. But yeah, definitely curious to see how this one turns out. This is the third beer that I've had from the Ringöbräu series after the Rauch beer and the Helles actually, both of which were really quite nice. So yeah, looking forward to this one. I enjoy my lager beers, as you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, and I am enjoying seeing Stigbergets try a few more traditional styles of beer after having mainly stuck with the New England hazy IPAs and imperial stouts for the last little while. So yeah, let's get cracking with this one. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Stigbergets Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then, to tell you a little bit about Stigbergets Bryggeri once again then. So, as I've mentioned to you already, Stigbergets Bryggeri are based in Gothenburg, Göteborg, up on the Swedish west coast, and the company was founded by Nils Hultkrantz and Richard Simonsson. So these two guys own two bars that share the one kitchen. This is the Bar Kino and Hagabjörn's Cafe, which can be found on Linnegatan in the city, and these both opened back in 2007, and the building itself is an independent cinema. If you want to have a little look at it, you can check out my out and about video that I did, which was filmed back in October of 2019, mainly in the Bar Kino, which is in the basement, but the Hagabjörn's Cafe is in the atrium of this place, and it's quite an impressive looking building actually. I think you should go and check that out. Some really interesting films there, so the next time I'm up in Gothenburg I will need to go and have a look at that again actually and enjoy the experience properly. But it was really fun to go and visit it anyway. But originally the idea that they had was to brew a few beers that they could sell in the bars, but this led to them kegging the beers and selling it on to other pubs, and then eventually to bottling the beers, which began in November of 2014. The original beers that they were brewing were mainly English and German styles, but of course they really started to make a name for themselves when they switched their focus to the more hoppy American styles of beer. But the original head brewer was Ole Andersson, who stayed with them until about April of 2017, and he is now he has always been one of the co-owners of OO Brewing, but in April of 2017 he left to dedicate his time fully to OO Brewing. He was the developer of the GBG Beer Week Beer 2016 and also the Amazing Haze, which are probably two of the beers that put Stigbergets on the trajectory that they're on now. He also developed the Narangi under his own OO Brewing brand, and you know, these New England hazy IPAs were what really made Stigbergets, the brewery that they are today. But he was replaced in April of 2017 for a short period of time by Barnaby Struve, who was one of the vice presidents at Three Floyds. And then soon after that, they moved to a brewery at Partihalana, where they were brewing 5,000 litre batches at a time. And they've also started working on some sour beers there as well. They started selling their beers in 440ml cans, as opposed to the little 330ml bottles they had before. If you want to see what those look like, you can go back and check out some of my very first Stigbergets reviews that I did. But since they've been doing these 440ml cans and the 330s as well for their stronger beers, they've been able to export their stuff across the world a lot more. These days though, they have a brew team of Ollie Banks, who used to work for Beavertown in London, and also Lucas Munraid, who worked for All In Brewing, one of the numerous gypsy breweries operating in the Gothenburg area, and they've been doing some really, really nice stuff since these two guys have come in as well. But they've just moved to a new brewery as of summer 2020 in Ringöbräu. Hence the name of this series of beer, Ringöbräu, and they're considering brewing some lambic beer there from what I understand, and they're saying that this new brewery that they have has the possibility for swimming facilities as well and a bar. So they're talking about it being like a sort of experience brewery, so it'll be interesting to see how that develops over the next little while, and hopefully we can go and have a look at that the next time I make it up to Gothenburg. But they opened up a bar in Stockholm in April of 2020, and they've also opened up their own folk oil shop in Gothenburg as well. For those of you watching outside of Sweden, folk oil is anything that's 3.5% and below, and that means that it can be sold in the supermarkets rather than having to be sold in the Systembolaget alcohol monopoly that we have here in Sweden. 3.5% is really low. I mean, Norway I think is 4.5%. I think in Finland it's about 5.5% as well, if I remember rightly. So yeah, Sweden's conditions are very, very strict in that sense. But yeah, it will be cool to go and have a little look at the folk oil shop as well. I know that in Stockholm there's a little craft beer shop that sells loads of different folk oils actually, so I need to go and check that out at some stage. But as of April 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 110 different kinds of beer. They're well known, as I say, for their New England hazy IPAs, but they're starting to produce a good few lager beers now of different varieties. They've always done some really nice imperial stouts as well, and you get the odd barley wine and other things from them too. But yeah, a very solid all-round brewery, and as I've said, also definitely one of the best known Swedish craft beer brands these days. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Stigbergets Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, that's it for your history section of the video. Let's get on and actually have a taste of this beer then. So just to let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open up. As you can see, it is actually quite similar to the other ones we've had in the Stigbergets Ringöbräu series before. They've always got this roundel with them, or this roundel on them that you can see. There's the new Stigbergets Bryggeri in there in Ringön. But what you can see on the background here is the Bayerische Staatskrest, if you like, basically the Bavarian state. Well, not the Bavarian state crest, I guess you could say, the Bavarian state colours. So yeah, the Bavarian state colours from Germany are these kind of blue and white checks, if you like. But the story behind the Märzen lager is quite interesting. So before you had artificial refrigeration in Germany, you know, obviously Germany seems to have focused on lager beers for most of the time. That's the kind of given, if you like. But a lager beer is basically defined as being a cold fermentation beer, so somewhere between 8 and 10 degrees Celsius for the fermentation to take place. But before artificial refrigeration, it was of course very difficult to maintain these temperatures. This is why many German breweries used to make rock cellars for themselves on the hills around the towns. You know, you see a lot of that in places like Bamberg, but it was actually banned to brew beer during the summer months. So for this reason, what they used to do was they brewed a stronger lager beer that would be left in the cellars, and then it would be drunk in October. So this is why you always had Oktoberfest Märzen. So the Märzen is a lager beer that is slightly stronger because they let it mature through the summer months in the cold rock cellars. So yeah, that's your story behind the Märzen lager. You don't see too many beers brewed outside of Germany that are termed specifically as Märzens, but yeah, essentially the Märzen style of beer is a slightly more kind of caramelly, biscuity sort of lager beer, if you like, almost like an amber lager, but not quite the same as a Vienna lager in a sense, and I guess probably the Czech equivalent of the Märzen would be the Letzak, actually, because yeah, you've got the Svetli, which is like a Helles, then you've got the Letzak, which is more like a Märzen, and of course you've got Cherny, which is Dunkel, and then Tmavi, which is like the Schwarzbier. Other lager beers, I guess you have, like I said earlier, you've got the Vienna lager, you've got the Box as well, and you also have, well, the Rauch beers is another one, and yeah, Doppelbox would be the other ones too. But yeah, I love a good lager beer, so I'm very curious to see how Stigbergets interpret the Märzen style. So yeah, the Oktoberfest, the original Oktoberfest style of beer, 5.5%, this one, 440 milliliter can. I think I only paid about 35 Swedish kroners or something like that for this. This beer wasn't too expensive, but you know, when it's a lager beer, that kind of makes sense, to be honest with you. But yeah, 35 Swedish kroners, roughly about €3.50, just a little bit over £3 sterling, and then maybe $4, $4.25 American for those of you watching in different places. But yeah, lovely artwork on this one, as you always get from the Ringöbräu series. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. But yeah, oh, it got a little bit excited there, obviously, and we'll just pour it out and into the glass. So yeah, it looks very, very good actually. Never thought I probably could have used my Pilsner Urquell tankard for this one, although that's a ½ litre and this is 440, but I'm sure it still would have worked. But I think for the moment that is enough for us to look at what this beer has in store for us in terms of appearance and things. So yeah, before the head disappears, you can see that it's poured with about a ½ finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head actually. It does look like a nice kind of fawny colour that there, and it is nice and frothy, though that's going to fade away and just be a very, very thin foamy layer, I would think. In terms of colour, this beer has a lovely sort of coppery thing going on with it. I think you guys can see that quite clearly on the camera. This has got a lovely sort of coppery mahogany type colour to it. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it looks pretty nice, this one, but nothing out of the ordinary for this beer in terms of what you would expect from a Märzen. Some of them can be a little bit kind of more light and slightly caramelly coloured, could we say. Some of them can be a little bit brighter than this. This one does have a nice rich sort of coppery colour, if you like. But yeah, the colour and appearance of this one is certainly not out of the ordinary for a Märzen style of beer. Remember, when it comes to beer, the colour is dependent on a few things. 1, the type of malts that you use in the first instance, then 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Adjuncts and barrel aging are also going to play a role in there, but not in the case of this particular style. So yeah, this one's probably got a good few kind of caramels and stuff in it like that. So yeah, the copper colour really makes sense. But yeah, as I said, nothing particularly strange about this beer or unusual when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we get on. Very curious about this. Now that does smell very nice. So the thing that I always look for with these German style lager beers is I look for authenticity. I don't look for these beers to do anything mad and unusual, but I look for them to be authentic and close to what you would actually get in Germany. I do miss living in Heidelberg. You know, you had the 2 breweries there had you know, just really awesome beers. I do miss the Brauhouses in Germany. But what I always love, and you know, I've always carried that love of lagers with me, although it's been more recently. It was thanks to Peter at the Clueless Drinker that I've really started to get into lagers again after I saw his Augustina Dunkel review. That's what really made me want to get back into the lager beers again. But yeah, we've had some great lagers over the last little while. Lagers seem to be enjoying a little bit of a renaissance at the moment, which I'm very happy about, because I think they've been neglected for quite a long time in favour of IPAs and things, which obviously are great, but it's nice to have a variety for sure. But yeah, this beer is kind of pretty much what you would expect from the Märzen. So what I would describe as being the main difference between a German Märzen and, say, a Czech Letzak, if you like, would be that the Czech variants of lagers tend to be a little bit more kind of yeasty and bready in a sense, whereas the German ones are a bit kind of crisper and cleaner, and you definitely get that vibe out of this one actually. Quite often with lager beers that are brewed in other countries, for example outside of Germany and Czech, you know, a lot of them can be quite yeasty and lean a bit more towards the kind of Czech side of things, so they can be somewhere in between, but this one strikes me as quite distinctly German. The first impression is that it's got that lovely kind of cleanliness to it and a little bit of crispness, so distinctly German, which I really appreciate, absolutely. So, yeah. Straight away with this beer, you're getting a lot of what you would expect from the style. There's a lovely sort of bread crusty backbone to this one. It's got a nice kind of, you know, it has got a little bit of that almost German rye bread kind of quality to it. You can feel that sort of form in the backbone of this beer. There's definitely a little bit of a lighter kind of wholemealy brown bread in there as well, which I can really appreciate. And then on top of that, you just get a little bit of brown sugar as well. Yeah, so I'd say that the brown sugar element in this one, you do get an element of a sweet caramel out of it. There's a little bit of a slightly toasty caramel element in there as well, which I can really appreciate. And you've also got a little touch of, you also have just a little touch of, like, you know, you've got a wee touch of a kind of woody, nutty element to this one too, which is quite interesting. You can always get some of these subtle sort of undertones from the more malty leaning lager beers, of course, but yeah, I'd say the woodiness and the nuttiness does have a fair wee bit of prominence in this one. It's a nice big kind of crusty rye bread you've got in there, a little bit of brown bread too, a bit of sweet caramel, and a little bit of a kind of toasty element in it as well. So yeah, I really appreciate how this beer kind of goes together, and the level of crispness that you get out of this one, it just smells really clean on the malty side of things. That is what makes it distinctly German for me, as opposed to being more kind of yeasty and Czech, if you like. And I like both. I do like both sides of the lager beer coin, but yeah, in terms of authenticity, this one comes across pretty nicely. What I will say though is that it's one of the more kind of bready leaning. It is definitely one of the more kind of bready leaning sort of Märzens that I've had on the German side of things. So yeah, the more that you smell of this one, the more you get that sort of rye bready, wholemealy bread kind of element out of it. But there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. It comes across as quite Dunkel-like in some ways, and I guess probably the main distinction between a Märzen and a Dunkel would be that the Märzens tend to, the brown sugars are a little bit more oily in a Märzen, I would say, whereas the brown sugars are a little bit more oily in a Dunkel, I would say, and the Märzen tends to be a little bit more grainy in a sense, and potentially a little bit more biscuity as well. So for me, that would be the main distinguishing characteristics between the two. Let me know your own thoughts on that in the comment section below. That's always an interesting point as well. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, this beer is pretty much what you'd expect. It's probably Hallertau or Tettnanger hops that are being used in this one. I would hazard a guess that it's Hallertau because of the Bavarian connection. The Tettnang region, of course, is in Baden-Württemberg, over on the other side of Germany. But yeah, two very big hop producing regions there. But yeah, you get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. It's that smooth German noble earthiness there. There's a nice bright floral character to this one, but obviously nowhere near as kind of bright and punchy, if you like, as some of the things you're going to get from the American IPAs and so on. But on the grassy side of things with this beer, again, it's quite bright, but at the same time it's quite smooth. You don't really have a zestiness to the grassy character in this beer as you'll get from other ones. But yeah, the green component for me, distinctly German and distinctly noble. You know, if you had Czech hops, for example, they'd be a little bit more kind of bright and spicy, whereas the Slovenian hops would tend to be a little bit more kind of, they tend to be a little bit more smooth, if you like, and a little bit more kind of balanced in a sense. So yeah, so yeah, the hoppy side of this beer, the green component goes together really nicely. On the fruity side of things, I would say this beer, it's kind of interesting. So there's a wee bit of a sort of sultana type element coming out of it. You do get a little touch of an almost figgy element in there as well. But yeah, a wee bit of a peary kind of character. So yeah, I'd say, yeah, sultanas. Yeah, I would stick with that. Sultanas, a little bit of a kind of figgy element to it, a little bit peary, and you know, maybe there's a wee hint of like a sort of black curranty sort of thing to it as well. So yeah, a wee touch of red fruit and a bit of a kind of peary sultana type thing as well. So yeah, just to be clear, sultanas, dried white, green, red sort of grapes. For me, those are sultanas. Raisins are the dried purple ones. I had to clear that up on the channel a few times, so that's why I mention it. But yeah, you know, very authentic smelling beer, this one. One of the more bready leaning Märzens I've come across, but I think it's about time that we have a taste of this beer. So yeah, this one is the Ringöbräu Märzen, 5.5% Märzen lager beer from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Gothenburg here in Sweden. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah. Again, that's another really solid effort from Stigbergets, I'm going to say. Thumbs up to them for this. Yeah, I mean, for kind of, I hope that some of the you know, Stigbergets regular drinkers have a go at some of these lager beers, because you know, most people that will go to Stigbergets will be looking for the IPAs and stuff, but I think it's really cool that they're starting to pay a bit more attention to the more traditional styles of beer. We had a barley wine from them a while back. We had a triple as well, which I thought was really nice, and there was also a Pilsner, which was one of the last ones they released before they started doing this this Ringöbräu series, and I thought that was a really well done Pilsner. But yeah, these beers, the lagers that they do, I think they tend to lean a little bit towards the kind of bready, sort of grainy side of things, but they work. They come together really nicely. So if you get the chance to try some of these Stigbergets lagers, I think you will enjoy them. Actually, I hope that they do a Doppelbock at some stage. I really want to try a Doppelbock from them, and I don't think they've done a Dunkel either, so I need to keep an eye on what's being released in the next few months. Absolutely. Maybe though the Doppelbock and the Dunkel will come later in the year, for the winter, if you like. But yeah, in terms of Märzens, this one is really nice. I'm a bit surprised actually that they released this one now instead of in October, because yeah, that would have been an interesting thing. But they might release a slightly different version of it in October, who knows. But yeah, it gets a thumbs up from me, and it is really nice and authentic. It is kind of what you would expect for the style. So yeah, this one, the aroma that you get out of this one translates very well into the flavour, in my opinion. So the backbone of this beer is definitely that kind of sort of rye bready, bread crusty sort of thing. That blankets the middle of your tongue there. You can feel as you kind of move on top of that though, you get a lovely kind of wholemealy bready type quality out of this one. If you go to the front corners of your palate and move diagonally back, it gives you a little bit of a sort of woody aroma, the flavour. I always do that, I always mix up flavour and aroma. But yeah, you get a little bit of a kind of woody undertone to the beer for sure. If you go to the dead centre of your palate and then just follow the line of your tongue forward, you will get one or two little nutty elements there. But yeah, the backbone of this beer, big rye bready bread crust in there, woody undertones, a little bit of a nuttiness, and a smooth wholemealy bready character as well. So I can certainly appreciate how that goes together. But yeah, definitely a breadier Märzen compared to some of the other ones that you're going to come across, if you like. Quite a few of those will be a little bit more, they'll be leaning a little bit more towards the biscuity side of things, we should say. But yeah, on top of that bready layer though, in the centre of your palate, you do get a nice kind of sweet caramelly element out of this one, and I do appreciate that. You know, it is quite sweet in the middle of the palate, but then as you move further out from that, it starts to get a little bit more like a kind of toasty, slightly toasty brown sugary element, and as you move out towards the very edges of the palate, it gets a little bit more like a McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing. But I think that kind of covers what's going on in the middle third of your palate with this beer. Rye bready bread crust, bit of a woody and nutty undertone in there, some smoother wholemeal bread on top of that, sweet caramel in the centre, a little bit toastier further out as you move further out, and then some biscuity notes, and all of that of course sits on top of the bready element. But in the aftertaste, it's the grainy side of the bread, the sort of rye grainy side of the bread that really sort of comes out of this one. I'm very curious, does it have a bit of rye malt in it? Well, I suppose it is quite unlikely, because you know the German purity law, the Reinheitsgebot, that would kind of that would be not allowed in this, of course, as well. But I've always wondered that with the German beers, you know, you have the Reinheitsgebot, but you also have the Hefeweizen. So, you know, does wheat count as malt? And surely if wheat counts as malt, then you can argue that rye, if you have malted rye, that should count as malt as well. So yeah, that's a wee technicality I'm not quite sure about when it comes to the Bavarian and later German brewery law. In Heidelberg, where I studied, they actually had an even stricter law about where in the local area the ingredients could come from, which was quite interesting. But yeah, the malty backbone of this beer is pretty much kind of what you'd expect. We've covered the middle third of your palate. Then on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there's a little bit of a sort of doughy build-up, if you like, and a bit of a stronger grainy element to the beer, which is quite nice. And then on the back third of your palate, you can feel it is really the kind of sort of toasty, bread crusty elements that sit there. On top of that, you start to get some of the yeasty elements. You can feel the more kind of airy, yeasty qualities coming out of the beer. But yeah, I think it goes together very nicely in that sense too. But yeah, I think it works really well. So yeah, if you start at the back of the palate, you can feel the flavours a little bit taller because you've got those airy yeasty, you've got those airy kind of I don't know if it's right to call it esters actually, but you get those airy kind of bready yeasty notes there on the back sitting on top of the grainy base. So as you move further forward from the back of your palate, you can feel it gradually condenses down. Then as you go into the middle third of your palate, it condenses down quite a lot and the flavours are quite compact and close together. But yeah, that covers the central and malty part of your palate quite well, I would think. On the hoppy side of things, back corners of the palate, it is kind of what you'd expect. Nice little touch of earthiness there. The earthiness has a wee bit of prominence, which I think builds a good bridge with the slightly more grainy, bread crusty malt profile that this beer has. But as you move further forward, it develops a little bit of a herbal quality. Then as you reach the kind of front half of the sides of your palate, it gives you that nice bright German noble hoppy quality. As I say, I suspect it will be Hallertau hops that are in this one. You know, you can get things like Hercules and Pearl and stuff like this that are a little bit stronger in alpha acid, but I suspect this one, just from the flavour that we have here, I suspect it is a little bit more kind of traditional in that sense. I think it will be the old school Hallertau hops, but then, you know, Hallertau Mittelfrüh or something like that. But yeah, on the front corners of the palate, there is a wee touch of, you know, there's a teeny little bit of a slight spice from the floral aromatic notes, but then around the front curve of the palate, it's distinctly lighter and more grassy. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this beer as well. So yeah, the green component in this one I think suits the malty side of the beer down to the ground actually, so nicely executed, absolutely. But let's focus on the front third of your palate and the fruitier elements of the beer too. But this is another really nicely executed lager. I have to say I'm very curious about the Maibock now, but yeah, on the border region again between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of that bready build up and a good wee bit of a kind of, you do get a good wee bit of a kind of toasty, bread crusty kind of thing out of it as well, which I can certainly appreciate. And then yeah, so there's a good little bit of that in this one. But then yeah, the base of that front third of your palate, it's quite grainy and brown bready again, so the backbone of that front third of your palate is more kind of, it's a bit more bread crusty actually. The more that you go into the aftertaste, it dries out and gives you a bit more of a bread crusty note, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just kind of roll their way out of the hops in this one. And it's quite, you know, the fruity side of the beer is quite similar to what we picked up in the Aroma, I would say. So yeah, for me, it's there's a little bit of red fruity note to this one, a little bit of a kind of sultana type quality in there. At the back of that front third of your palate, for me, it's quite a bit of a sultana type note in there. Those dried white, green, red grapey sort of things. I'm getting quite a bit of that. And as you move further forward, it develops a little bit of a slightly kind of figgy, red fruity quality. Then on the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's got a wee bit of a more kind of black curranty element underneath too, and on top of it you maybe get a wee bit of a more red berry, blackberry kind of thing which is coming out of it. So you do get some nice red fruity kind of berryish elements out of this beer, but you know, they're not sharp or anything like that. They are kind of more you know, they are just a little bit more sort of smooth, if you like, in the sense it's like a sort of fruity bread, like a sultana bread sort of thing that you get on the front third of your palate. I want to say there's a wee touch of a slightly peary element to this beer too, but yeah, the fruity side of the beer. So tannas, a little bit of pear, and a little bit of a kind of figgy, kind of slightly curranty type note forming the fruity part of this beer. But overall, as a Märzen lager beer, I think it's really nicely done, and definitely one of the kind of more bready ones that I've come across too. But yeah, I like it, so it gets a thumbs up from me. Let's round off the review then with the mouthfeel. So for me, the mouthfeel of this beer, what would I say? Yeah, mouthfeel for me is kind of bottom end and mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth in this one. It's got a very kind of clean mouthfeel to it, with a bit of a slight oily slickness to it. This is one of the things that you always get with these with lager beers that are brewed in other countries, especially in the Nordic countries. You always get this lovely clean mouthfeel from beers brewed in the Nordic countries, which is nice, and it works very well with lager beers in my opinion. So you have a very clean, slightly slick lager beer, this one, which suits the more malty profile of the Märzen style. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, the hoppy bitterness, I think this is probably about 20 IBUs, you know, something like that, 20 or 25 IBUs. There is a little bit of bitterness coming from the grain in this beer, although I don't know, technically speaking, whether you should count that as IBU, but I would say that this beer has the equivalent of about 25-ish IBUs, something like that. The malty side of the beer, as I say, has a little bit of graininess to it. There's a wee bit of sweetness comes out of it. That comes out a wee bit more in the aftertaste as well, but mainly a kind of grainy backbone to the beer, and some lovely juicy, fruity elements to this beer as well, as I say. So it's got everything you would want from a Märzen lager beer. Really nice bready example of this particular style of beer. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. A really nice example of the style, so well done to Stigbergets once again for this one. I always get excited when I talk about lager beers and the review ends up being a little bit longer, so I apologise for that. But anyway, let's round off the review there then. So this one was the Ringöbräu Märzen at 5.5% ABV, a lovely bready, slightly more kind of grainy example of the Märzen style lager beer from Stigbergets Bryggeri in Ringön in Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. I really enjoyed this one. I look forward to the Maibok, which you'll see in a few videos time, and I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Stigbergets Bryggeri, and we will return to these guys very soon. Slàinte, skull, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.